to Dark Dialogue, the podcast where we unravel the shadows of the human mind and dive deep into the cases that haunt us. I'm your host, John.
And I'm Angela, and alongside my co-host John, we're here to explore the stories that keep you up at night, tales of mystery, betrayal, and the kind of truth that's stranger than fiction.
Each episode, we dive deep into the cases that haunt us, the mysteries that linger, and the questions that refuse to fade, giving a voice to those left forever voiceless.
So, grab your headphones, dim the lights, and join us for a conversation that's as gripping as it is unsettling. This is Dark Dialogue. Let's step into the darkness together.
Echoes of Absence, the disappearance of Holly Bobo. Today we're tackling a case that gripped a small Tennessee community, dominated national headlines, and left us with as many doubts as answers. The disappearance and murder of Holly Bobo. This is a story of a young woman with a bright future, a family shattered by loss, and an investigation so sprawling it became the most expensive in Tennessee history. It is also a story of convictions, recanted testimony, and a lingering suspicion that justice might still be out of reach. So grab your favorite drink and settle in. Over the next couple of hours, we'll walk through every twist and turn of the Holly Bobo case, from that fateful morning in April 2011 to the courtroom battles and beyond. Angela, why don't you tell us a little bit about the area?
All right, so Holly's information states that she was from Darden, Tennessee. And offhand, I know that Tennessee is known as the volunteer state and is world famous for its whiskey. I had to dig a bit more to learn about Darden. I'll admit I was stunned that on the first site I went to, there was literally one sentence about Darden. Just one. And that sentence was, quote, Darden is an incorporated community and census-designated place, a CPD, in Henderson County, Tennessee, United States. As of the 2010 census, its population was 399 people. It's huge.
Ginormous.
Yes. For those that don't know, myself included until now, CPDs are defined by the U.S. Census Bureau for statistical purposes only, meaning they are not legally incorporated and don't have their own government. That said, I did not give up and found a tiny bit more. Darden is known for its high ownership rate. Specifically, the town boasts a 100% home ownership rate.
That is crazy.
Insane.
Yeah, I've never even heard of that before.
Right. 399 people.
This is true.
I mean,
this is true.
They don't say what kind of homes they are, but they all own one.
They all own one.
And the average household owns 4 vehicles. Since that was the majority of the information I could find on Darden, I looked at the county it belongs to. Henderson County yields much more information. It was established in 1821 and is named after Lieutenant Colonel, I can speak, Lieutenant.
Third time's a charm.
Yep. Lieutenant. Today, Junior. Lieutenant Colonel James Henderson, Jr. Don't know why I'm speaking like Captain Kirk all of a sudden, but I got it all out.
That's all right.
Since I've become intrigued with comparing census records for population, I will tell you about that as well. I know you were waiting for that.
I am.
He always is. Census records from 1830 reported a population of 8,748 people, while records from 2020 reported 27,842 people.
Wow.
Yeah, so they increased, just a tad.
Just a little bit.
20,000 or so, drop in a bucket. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the county has a total of 526 square miles, of which 5.8 square miles are covered by water. Henderson County is noted to be a desirable place to live, or desirable, if you're pronouncing things correctly, place to live in Tennessee, as the 40 miles of hiking trails, 1,035 miles of active waters, and 100 miles of shoreline attract a variety of outdoor enthusiasts. I'll add a tidbit here for my politically intrigued co-host.
Oh, yay.
Though he likely already knows, because he knows all the political things. Henderson County is overwhelmingly Republican and has not voted for a Democrat candidate since Samuel Tilden in 1876 election.
Sounds a lot like Wyoming.
And the last time it did not vote Republican was in 1912, when the county supported progressive candidate Theodore Roosevelt.
And his party was?
Independent.
No, it
No?
was the Bull Moose Party.
Okay, well, fine. I told you, you know the things. I learn the things. This is how we work. Henderson County was the only county in the state outside of East Tennessee to vote. Sorry for the weird noises, folks. That's just the charm in me. Was the only county in the state outside of East Tennessee to vote for Roosevelt in that election. Now onto the topic at hand, crime and crime rates. Henderson County's crime rate is lower than the national average, specifically an overall crime rate of 15.75 per 1,000 people, compared to the national average of 33.97 per 1,000 people.
It's about half the national average.
This includes both violent and property crime. The county is actually known for its safety, leaving a certain sense of security for its residents, which is why this case rocked the community so deeply. So, John, will you please take the reins and give us some insight on this beautiful young lady who was taken from us far too soon?
I will, and thank you, Angela.
You're so welcome.
Holly's father was Dana Bobo, and I couldn't find out a lot of information about him, as is typical. He was likely from Tennessee, and he married Karen sometime in the early to mid 1980s. What we do know is that he was a devoted father who worked to provide for his family while maintaining a close bond with his children, especially Holly. He was described as a steady and hardworking man. Dana's life revolved around his family and their shared activities, such as hunting and spending time outdoors. He and Holly shared a particularly strong connection, often engaging in activities like four-wheeler rides and fishing, which highlighted their close-knit relationship. Dana's faith was a significant part of his life, and he was an active member of the Corinth Baptist Church, where the family worshiped together. And then we have her mother, Karen Bobo. And Karen was a school teacher at an elementary school in Decatur County and was known for her nurturing and compassionate personality, qualities that she instilled into Holly. And again, no information on her early life, but as a mother, Karen was deeply involved in her children's lives, fostering a home environment filled with love and faith. She too was particularly close to Holly, often preparing her lunch and checking in on her studies, as she did on the morning of Holly's abduction. Karen's role as a teacher extended to her community, and she actually had taught some of the individuals that are later going to be implicated in Holly's case. And those include Zachary Adams and Jason Autry when they were in grade school, which is an added layer of personal complexity in this tragedy.
It's got to sting a bit.
Oh, it's got to be super hard. Clint Bobo was Holly's older brother by about 5 years. So he was 25 at the time of her abduction and was a college student who was pursuing a degree in social work. Growing up, Clint and Holly shared a typical sibling bond marked by shared activities like hunting, riding four-wheelers, and spending weekends together in the outdoors. Clint was described as close to his sister, though less outgoing than Holly's vibrant personality. And he lived at home with his parents and Holly, which contributed to the family's tight-knit dynamic. Now, as is repeated over and over again in this case, the Bobo family was characterized by their deep faith, community involvement, and devotion to one another. They lived modestly in Darden, where trust was so high that locking your doors was uncommon. Detail that Clint would later reflect might have left them vulnerable. It's something that I can relate to, though, because growing up, we never locked our doors.
No.
And I can remember as a kid that, if we went on vacation where we were going to be gone for a while, it was a really big deal to lock the doors.
Mm-hmm.
And the one, I guess you would call it our front door, you couldn't even lock it from the outside. So you had to push the little bar over and then go around to the other door, which you could lock from the inside. And so, yeah, we just,
Little song and dance.
yeah, and it just never was a thing. We just didn't lock our doors. So it was something totally out of the ordinary when we did.
We were different. We had a door that actually my parents still have it. It locks automatically as soon as you shut it.
Oh,
So if
really?
you go outside, you better mean it.
You better, yeah.
Or you're trekking all the way around to hope the back door is open.
I gotcha. So the Bobo home was already a hub of activity, with Holly studying at the kitchen table, Clint pursuing his degree, and Dana and Karen balancing work and family life. Their church, Corinth Baptist, was a second home, and that's where Holly's singing and the family's participation strengthened their bonds even more.
Man, am I contagious? You're
Yes,
okay. I apologize now.
you should. Holly's abduction shattered their sense of security, thrusting them into a public ordeal that tested their resilience. Dana and Karen's marriage endured under immense strain, supported by their shared faith and community. Now, that just says a lot, because so often in these cases, the marriage just doesn't survive. Oftentimes they end
It's a
up in
broken
divorce.
home, yeah.
Yeah. Clint, younger, but still finding his path, faced some unique challenges as a witness and a temporary suspect. Yet he remained loyal to his family's quest for answers. Together, they attended every day of the later trial, despite the emotional cost, and their attorney described them as, quote, the strongest family he'd ever seen. And they were united by love for Holly. In public statements, the Bobos emphasized Holly's positive qualities, such as her smile, her voice, her compassion. They chose to celebrate her life rather than dwell on the tragedy. The family expressed gratitude for community support, but sought privacy to mourn. A request that underscored their desire to heal away from media scrutiny. Their faith, described by friend Kevin Alexander, sustained them through years of uncertainty, media tension, and gossip, allowing them to hold on to hope until Holly's fate was finally confirmed. The Bobo family story is one of love, loss, and perseverance. Dana's quiet resolve, Karen's nurturing strength, and Clint's burdened loyalty paint a picture of a family forever changed but determined to keep Holly's memory alive through their shared values and community ties. Let's get back to Holly. Before we get into the chaos of what happened, let's start with who Holly Bobo was. So, Holly Lynn Bobo was born October 12th, 1990. As we've discussed, she was the youngest of two kids born to Karen and Dana Bobo. The four of them lived together on Swan Johnson Road, which was a quiet stretch surrounded by woods and farmland. Had a dog named Rascal, who will play a small but important role in our story here in a little bit. Holly's childhood was shaped by a supportive environment rooted in faith and community ties. In true Southern fashion, her family attended the Corinth Baptist Church, where Holly was active, singing in the choir and expressing her Christian faith. Friends described as a cornerstone of her life from a young age. She was known for her warm, outgoing personality and a genuine desire to connect with others, traits that made her well liked among her peers and her teachers. Now, Holly spent her early years in Darden, surrounded by a tight community where neighbors knew each other well. Friends recalled her as someone who brought positivity to those around her, often without realizing the impact that she'd had. One childhood friend, speaking at a memorial service, shared a story from elementary school, noting Holly's integrity, saying that she refused to let him copy from her work because, quote, it wasn't fair. That just shows her sense of right and wrong, even as a young child.
And strength.
Absolutely. Her involvement in church extended to recording gospel songs with a friend, Jill Zimmer, for a funeral. highlighting her talent and her willingness to contribute to her community. Holly attended Scotts Hill High School in Henderson County, Tennessee. She was a bright and dedicated student, excelling academically and earning a reputation as a hard worker. Beyond the classroom, she was involved in extracurricular activities that reflected her vibrant spirit. Holly's outgoing nature and infectious smile made her a favorite among classmates, and she formed strong friendships that lasted into her later years. Teachers and peers remembered her as a kind and dependable person, someone who balanced her studies with an active social life. Her passion for helping others was evident early on, foreshadowing her later decision to pursue nursing. Holly's faith remained a guiding force throughout her school years. Friends noted that she encouraged those around her to attend church and Sunday school, reflecting her commitment to living out her values. She dated a local boy, and his mother recalled Holly's influence in nudging him towards church attendance, showing her ability to inspire others quietly but effectively. Her involvement in community events like singing at the church or spending time with friends at places like the local Sonic drive-through after school, picture of a typical small town teenager with a strong sense of purpose. So by the time she graduated from Scotts Hills High School in 2008, Holly had laid the foundation for her future ambitions. Her academic success and compassionate nature led her to enroll in the nursing program at the University of Tennessee, Martin's Parsons Center. She continued to shine as a dedicated student. Those who knew her in childhood and high school described her as someone who wanted her life to count, a sentiment echoed by her pastor, who noted her drive to serve others even as a young person. Holly's early years were marked by a blend of small town simplicity, deep faith, and a quiet determination to make a difference. Her childhood and school experiences shaped her into the person remembered by her community as a light whose loss was felt deeply. So 2011 found Holly, age 20 at the time, enrolled as a nursing student at the University of Tennessee at Martin Parsons Center, which was about 15 miles from her home. By all accounts, she was dedicated and always up early to study. She was focused on her dream of helping people as a nurse, and friends described her as shy, sweet, and compassionate. She was still active in her family's church, still singing in the choir, and had a close circle of loved ones. She was also dating a guy by the name of Drew Scott. Drew was her high school sweetheart, who'd given her a promise ring for Christmas in 2010, and she wore that ring every day. Fun fact, Holly was the cousin of country singer Whitney Duncan, who later wrote a song called Better Place in her memory. They don't follow new music at all, really, but I had to dig into this a little bit. Whitney Duncan was a bit older than Holly and was born August 3rd, 1984. She'd led quite the life, and like I mentioned, she's a country music singer and songwriter. She finished as the 5th place finalist on the 5th season of Nashville Star.
Very nice.
Whitney has released one studio album and has charted on the U.S. Hot Country Songs chart with When I Said I Would and Skinny Dippin', as well as a Christmas single and a guest appearance on a Kenny Rogers single, which was released before her Nashville Star appearance. She hasn't just limited her life to singing either. The fall of 2011, she competed on the 23rd season of Survivor South Pacific, and she finished in 9th place, becoming the 4th member of the jury. It was on this Survivor experience that she met her future husband, Keith Tollefson. 2014 seems like it was an insane year for her. In May, she appeared on TLC's Say Yes to the Dress, where she chose a wedding dress for her upcoming marriage to Keith, which took place in July of that same year. I don't know if it was their honeymoon or just more insanity for the year, but that fall, the newlyweds competed together on the 25th season of The Amazing Race.
Goodness sake.
Yeah, where they placed in 8th place. She really has nothing else to do with the story, but I just found her part in this absolutely fascinating. So
I wonder if they took a breath. Did they sleep at all?
I don't think they could have slept very damn
goodness
much.
sake.
So yeah,
Anyway, that's a cool story. Thank you for adding that.
absolutely. So let's get back to Holly. She stood about 5 feet 3 inches tall with long blonde hair and striking blue eyes. She was the kind of person who lit up a room without even trying. On the morning of April 13th, 2011, she was just another college kid prepping for a big day. She was set to have a nursing exam, which she'd been studying for since 4:30 that morning. However, things would change forever on that April day. So let's set the scene. It's early morning on Wednesday, April 13th, 2011. Again, we're in Darden, Tennessee, and the Bobo household is waking up. Mother Karen was teaching second grade at Scotts Hill Elementary at the time, and she's getting ready for work. Dana, Holly's dad, is getting ready to head out too. Holly is sitting at the table with her books spread out, cramming for her upcoming exam. Karen packs Holly her lunch, likely something simple, probably a sandwich and a snack, and she kisses her goodbye. Karen leaves the house around 7 o'clock a.m., and Dana's out the door shortly thereafter. Kent, who was 25 at the time, is still asleep in his room. And that's not a big surprise, as he's 25, so.
Wish I was 25 and still asleep in my room sometimes.
Me too. So, around 7:30 a.m., Holly gets a call from her boyfriend, Drew Scott. That morning, Drew was out turkey hunting on her grandmother's property, which was about 10 miles away. He called to tell Holly about a little mix-up. Relative didn't recognize him and had confronted him, thinking that he was a trespasser. They had sorted it all out, however, and he was just sharing it as a funny story. So the two chatted briefly, but it was about time for Holly to head to class. They end the conversation and hang up. Holly then gathers everything she'd need for the day. She grabbed her nursing notebook with student nurse and a smiley face scribbled on the cover, the lunch that her mom had packed her keys, and she headed out the door to an attached carport where her black Ford Mustang was parked. Now, here's where things get strange. And when I say strange, what I really mean is so freaking weird that it's almost hard to believe. So the Bobo family home was in a very rural area of Darden. And as you told us, Angela, Darden itself is rural.
Yeah.
The area is characterized by spread out homes, often separated by large yards, fields, or wooded areas. And I couldn't find specific details of how close their neighbors were. However, given the rural setting, close in this context likely means like a quarter of a mile away.
Yeah, like around here.
Yes. And that's backed up by interviews that I watched about the Bobo home, and it's just surrounded with woods. It's like rolling hills and trees, and there was no neighbors that you could see. So
it's like a double-edged sword. It's beautiful. It's where you want to be. It's serene, but then there's no one to help.
Right. It's secluded and
Yeah.
it's secluded.
And
Both
did
the
we
good
mention
and the bad of
secluded?
seclusion.
Yeah.
So I bring up the distance because around 7:40, neighbor heard a scream. The neighbor's house couldn't have been very close, but the scream was loud enough to make the neighbor call his mom. And the neighbor's mom then called Karen at work, and this call took place around 7:45. The mom then heads directly to the Bobo's home. And around 5 minutes later, say 7:50, the family dog Rascal, who I mentioned before, he started barking like crazy. This woke Clint up, but he's 25 years old, he's groggy, maybe he's been out late the night before, or maybe he's just a normal kid at that age. They're not known as an age group that's in love with mornings to begin with. So Clint hears voices coming from the direction of the carport, so he peeks through the blinds and he sees Holly kneeling on the ground, facing a man that's dressed in camouflage. They're arguing, or at least it looks heated. Clint assumes that it's Holly's boyfriend, Drew. He was obviously upset about something. The couple then stood up and started walking towards the woods behind the house. So, following the neighbor's call, Karen's instincts immediately kick in. Right around the same time that Clint was looking out the window, Karen is making the first 911 call. And this call was logged at 7:55. So a little before 8 o'clock, she dials the home phone and Clint answers. And he tells her about the strange events that he saw between Holly and Drew moments earlier. What Karen then says, I can absolutely relate to, because I just have to say that I love country people, and she reacted exactly like I would have reacted. And she says, Clint, that's not Drew. Get a gun and shoot him. So Karen knew that it couldn't be Drew, and she knew that because he was hunting miles away. She had been the one that had arranged it herself. So poor Clint is confused, and he says, you want me to shoot Drew? But around 8 o'clock, he does what mom says, and he grabs a loaded pistol, heads outside, and discovers something chilling. And that is a small puddle of blood near Holly's car in the carport. And the neighbor's mom pulls into the driveway about the same time to check and make sure everything was okay with the family, because remember, she left work right away and headed that direction. So as soon as Clint saw the blood, he immediately calls 911. So a little before 8:10 a.m., the first deputy is arriving at the Bobo home, and he starts looking around and assessing the situation. Unfortunately, despite a damn impressive response time.
Right? I was just thinking that.
Yeah, it's incredible. But by the time the deputy did arrive, Holly and the strange camouflage-clad man had disappeared into the nearby woods. So I know that a lot is going on here and things are happening super fast. So let's just quickly recap the timeline up to this point.
That's the fastest in most of these cases I've ever seen people react.
It's incredible.
That's a hell of a game of phone tag right there.
It really is. I mean, the whole thing is just incredible. So 7:40 a.m., the neighbor hears the scream and calls his mom.
Good neighbors, by the way. Kudos to them.
Absolutely. And this neighbor kid, I'm thinking he must be around Clint's age or a little bit younger or something. He's apparently still living at home, but I did read that he was working construction. So I think he's a young adult.
Yeah.
But, you know, for somebody that age to hear something like that and react that quickly is impressive in itself.
Right.
And so 7:40, the neighbor hears the scream, calls his mom. 7:45, the neighbor's mom calls Karen Bobo at work. 7:50, Rascal the dog is barking, and that wakes up Clint. And he notices that his sister's car is in the driveway, and he calls his mother's cell phone at the school, but he doesn't reach her. And at 7:55, Karen is on the phone to 911 from the school. And then a little before 8, Karen Bobo calls her house, and Clint tells her that he saw his sister and her boyfriend walking toward the woods. And Karen tells him that the man is not Holly's boyfriend. to get a gun and shoot him. And so at right about 8 o'clock, Clint grabs the pistol and he heads outside and he sees a puddle of blood near his sister's car. His neighbor's mom pulls in at the same time, and then Clint calls 911. And then just a little before 8:10, the first deputy is pulling into the house. And their investigation makes the authorities believe that Holly was abducted. So that is insanely impressive. 7:40 is the first indication that anything is going wrong. And within about 30 minutes of that first indication, the first deputy's pulling into the house. And you have all the things that happened in between there.
Yeah.
So it's very impressive.
I didn't hear Clint's 911 call, but I did hear Karen's, and it's heart-wrenching.
Oh my gosh. It's one of the worst I think I've ever heard. It just breaks your heart.
From someone who's not the actual victim calling 911.
Right. Yep. So, like I said, I know that there's a lot going on and it's hard to keep it all straight. And it's really not all that important. I think that what is the most important thing to realize is just how fast everything happened. And like I said, I find everyone involved in this to be pretty damn impressive. The neighbor hearing the scream and immediately reacting, his mom jumping into action and not only calling Karen, but jumping in her own car and heading to their house. Clint grabbing
whatever might she walk into.
Absolutely. And then Clint grabbing a gun and heading out immediately to save his sister, and the response time of the deputy. I mean, so many times somewhere along that chain, someone drops the ball. A lot of the times we're complaining that it's the police that dropped the ball because they immediately assume that there's an innocent explanation. It's just a college kid being a kid.
They're adults, dude. They ran away.
They have a right to go missing. We hear that all the time, but that was not the case here at all. Everyone jumped into action and immediately. And I think that if it was possible to save Holly, thanks to everyone's immediate action, she would have been saved.
We wouldn't be talking about her right now.
Absolutely. So Holly's dad, Dana, was at work on that morning, and upon learning of the situation, he immediately raced home, joining neighbors and law enforcement in the frantic search for his daughter. And his emotional response was palpable as he expressed a gut-wrenching fear that something bad had happened to one of his kids. And it's a sentiment that underscored his protective nature. Dana's suspicion almost from the start was that Holly's abductor might have been someone familiar with the family's routine, noting how the timing aligned when he, Karen, and Holly typically left the house. And this insight reveals his analytical side as he tried to piece together the circumstances of her disappearance. Despite the public scrutiny and the emotional toll, Dana remained a pillar for his family. So as I said, the 911 calls set off a frenzy. Henderson County Sheriff's deputies swarm the Bobo property, and they find the blood that Clint saw, and it would later be confirmed to be Holly's blood. They immediately start investigating this as an abduction and start piecing things together right away. The cell phone pings show Holly's phone moving north, away from the home tower, toward a wooded area near Interstate 40. The phone stops for about 20 to 30 minutes in that area, and then it heads south on a different route. And the final ping would come from an area where her phone and SIM card would later be found. Now, I couldn't find the size of the Henderson County Sheriff's Office, but I don't think it can be very large. And they knew immediately that they were going to need some help on this. And they called in the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation on the same day as Holly's abduction, so pretty much immediately. And that's just another example of this incredible community.
Thank goodness we finally have some decent law enforcement to talk about.
Absolutely, because it gets so damn frustrating. You get in these smaller departments and I think ego gets the best of
Yeah.
them and they're like, oh, we can solve it.
God
We can handle
complex.
it.
Yeah.
And these guys, I mean, they know their limitations. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make them less capable cops. It's just that their department is probably not large enough to have devoted homicide detectives that do this stuff all the time.
And that's why there's a chain of hierarchy in the criminal justice system.
That's right. That's why an outfit like the TBI exists, so that these smaller departments can call them up and ask for help. And so, yeah, hats off to them for doing that. And then the community themselves is just incredible. So the next day, volunteers start pouring in. Hundreds of people showed up and they start combing the woods, looking for any signs of Holly. They find her lunchbox floating in a nearby creek, and then some papers with her name on them are found scattered along roadways, and a pair of pink women's underwear is found on the roadside. A neighbor reported seeing a white truck speeding away that morning. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, or the TBI, are the ones that are in control of the investigation at this point. And they too immediately recognized that this is an abduction, and they investigated as such from the beginning. So Holly's face is soon plastered on missing person flyers across multiple states. National news picks this story up, and the case is featured on CNN, Fox, and The Nancy Grace Show. The community was in shock. Who would take this sweet nursing student, and why? Obviously, investigators almost immediately interview Clint. He gives a description of the man that he saw with Holly in the carport, and this description soon becomes the first big lead. He describes the man as being between 5'10" and 6 feet tall and weighing between 180 and 200 pounds. He says the man had a deep voice, dark hair, which was long enough to touch his collar. The TBI starts looking at local sex offenders, drug users, and anybody with a record. Karen and the Bobo family were deeply involved in keeping Holly's case in the public eye after her abduction. Karen spoke to media outlets, including local news and national programs, to urge anyone with information to come forward. And it broke my heart. And I actually had a hard time watching and getting through her interviews. She expressed her anguish and her hope, emphasizing Holly's kind nature and the family's desperate need for answers. And she cried and begged for Holly to be returned. And around the 1 year mark, which was in 2012, Karen told a Memphis news station, quote, "The whole year has just been one continuous nightmare that you go to bed with every night and wake up with every day," end quote. She described mailing flyers to churches, asking for prayers, and pleaded for people to resubmit tips to the TBI hotline because she was worried that early leads might have been overlooked in the chaos of the initial search.
Right.
Now, as I said, during these appearances, Karen's tone was consistently emotional, often tearful, and she pleaded and begged for Holly's safe return. She also highlighted the $250,000 reward that was raised by private donations alongside the TBI's $85,000 for information leading to an arrest or Holly's recovery. She shared details like watching old home videos of Holly singing or dancing to renew her hope, underscoring her belief that Holly would never give up on them. These moments were meant to humanize Holly and keep the public engaged. And I've watched probably hundreds of interviews like this, maybe more. I don't know. I've
Mm-hmm.
watched a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
and some are a lot tougher than others. But like I said before, some of Karen's are some of the hardest that I've watched.
I didn't try to watch her interviews because the 911 call and her court testimony was hard enough
Yeah.
that I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna make it through the
Yeah,
interviews.
they were tough. They were rough. I mean, you could just see the pain in
You
this poor
you could
woman.
feel the pain through the
Absolutely.
screen on the
Yep.
ones I saw. So
Absolutely. Yeah, you
yeah,
really could. And I think it's safe to say that both of our hearts truly break for the entire Bobo family.
I just wanted to hug her. Like,
A-
where are you?
Absolutely.
Let me hug you.
Yep.
And I'm not that much of a hugger of people I don't know, but I really wanted to hug her.
I felt so bad for her, for the whole family, and for every family that has to go through something like this.
100%, definitely.
I truly cannot imagine. I just can't imagine
Mm-mm.
going through something like this. The TBI worked hard on this case, and like I said, everyone jumped in right from the start. As is the unfortunate reality of so many of these cases, though, the days turned into weeks, then into months. No Holly, no suspect, just a trail of clues, and it's starting to feel cold. So, almost immediately, investigators started to suspect Clint. As we've talked about, he was 25 at the time and was the only one home during Holly's abduction. He was also the last person known to see her alive. And his account of that morning raised questions for investigators, primarily due to inconsistencies and his initial inaction and apparent lax approach, which led to early suspicion of him. Clint claimed that he was asleep when the family dog started barking and it woke him up. His mother, Karen, called after the neighbor reported hearing the scream and urged him to check on Holly. So, from a window, Clint saw Holly kneeling in the carport with a man in camouflage, whom he mistook for her boyfriend, Drew Scott. And that was based on prior conversations about Drew turkey hunting not too far away. Like I said, I think it was about 10 miles away.
Yeah.
And he told Karen, I knew it was Holly, but he didn't immediately intervene, assuming that it was a domestic situation. And when Karen clarified that it wasn't Drew, she instructed him to get a gun. And Clint grabbed a loaded pistol, went outside, and found blood near Holly's car, at which point he called 911. So when Henderson County Sheriff's deputies arrived, followed by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, Clint recounted what he had seen. Investigators noted his hesitation to act and discrepancies in his story, such as varying details about the man's appearance and the exact sequence of events. For example, he described the man as 5'10" to 6 feet tall, 180 to 200 pounds with dark hair, but he admitted that he didn't see the face clearly. And his claim of mistaking the man for Drew, who was later confirmed to be hunting elsewhere, also puzzled authorities. So within days, the TBI and the sheriff's department focused on Clint due to his presence at the scene and the lack of immediate suspects. Standard protocol often examines family members first, and Clint's account did raise some red flags. So, first, he didn't rush to confront the man despite Karen's alarm, which some investigators found odd.
I did too, kind of.
Yeah, I know that you had mentioned that
Yeah.
it just didn't sit right with
In
you.
a heated, you see your sister in a heated conversation. I mean, see something. Even if you think it's the boyfriend, they shouldn't. If it looks domestic,
I
maybe you
know.
should check it out.
That one is
It's
just a
tough.
tough one. It
It's.
really is.
I'm not trying to shame Clint. I'm just like I struggle a little bit with that too. Like open the window and yell, "Hey, everything's okay." That's what
I
my brother would have done.
I definitely see both sides, I guess.
Yeah.
I understand wholeheartedly what you're saying and what the investigators and
Right.
stuff were seeing. And then on the other side of the coin, I'm a brother of three sisters, and they woke me up, or if I got woke up because the dog was barking at them and arguing with their boyfriend, if I'm being honest, at that age, I probably would have opened the window and been like, "Will you guys shut the hell up? I'm trying to sleep in here."
But the unknown man may have looked at you and you'd have gotten a better look.
This is true. Yes,
Hindsight's 2020.
absolutely. Yep. Also, his description of events shifted slightly as he tried to recall more details, which police interpreted as potential inconsistencies. The blood in the carport and Holly's disappearance suggested a violent act, and Clint's proximity made him a logical starting point. So, investigators asked Clint to take a polygraph test, and he did so willingly. He also cooperated by removing his shirt for inspection to show that he had no blood or injuries and answered their extensive questions. He later expressed shock at being considered a suspect and said, "I tried to do everything they asked, plus more." The polygraph results weren't publicly disclosed, but they didn't lead to any charges or anything. So I'm assuming that they were either inconclusive or probably more likely he passed the polygraph. Like I said, several factors contributed to Clint being eyed as a person of interest. He was the sole witness as the only family member who was present, and his account was critical but hard to corroborate without any other witnesses. And his delay in intervening, like you said, him just watching from the window and not
Yeah.
immediately checking on Holly, struck investigators as unusual. Though Clint explained that he was groggy and confused, and he honestly thought that it was Drew.
Right.
Early reports note his story changed as he tried to clarify details such as the man's size or what he had heard, which police saw as suspicious. And Clint attributed that to just trying to help by recalling more than he initially remembered. And can relate to that. I've been in situations where your adrenaline's pumping and you're really tense, and they ask what happened and you try to explain it to them, and then
You're
after
tripping
you,
over your words.
yes, and then once you have the chance to settle down and catch your breath a little bit, and then a calmer demeanor, explain, a lot of the times you recall more details and everything's more clear. And
Well, and honestly, in situations like that, your brain works so much faster than your mouth,
right,
and your mouth will not spit it out.
yes.
So it sounds like it changes, but it could just be accidental omissions
And
because you're
in
trying to get the other, what you think are more important details out.
And in this particular case, I think that's exactly what it was. But I also don't fault the investigators because
Got to do their job.
they got to do their job. And in countless other cases,
Right.
it's just the opposite.
These
when they're
people are
like,
talking to this guy.
yeah. And how many stories do you hear where they tell a story that doesn't make any sense and the cops are like,
Okay.
yeah, all right, whatever, and go on about their business. And then you find out 10 years down the road that they are the murderer or whatever,
Yeah.
and the cops never looked at them or cleared them because their insane story the cops bought.
So this UFO showed up.
Right.
I saw lights. Oh, that sounds plausible. Case closed, moved on.
And that happens all the time. So
Yes, it does.
in this particular instance, I see Clint's side and I see the investigator's side, and I really can't
You're
fault
stuck on the fence.
either one of them. I think they both did, neither one of them did the wrong thing.
Right.
So,
And both did more right than in other cases we've read.
100%. Yes. Now, we know that family members are often scrutinized in missing persons cases and murders, and especially when evidence like blood suggests that there has been foul play at the home. And so looking at Clint makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
And public speculation also fueled suspicion. Online forums and local gossip questioned why Clint didn't act faster, with some wrongly suggesting that he had a criminal history, which he absolutely did
They're
not.
grasping at straws.
Yeah. They're just either,
the rumor mill.
yeah, they're either lying or they're just repeating what somebody else had said.
Or
But
they're trying to make themselves feel better that there's not some masked killer out there and it was actually Clint.
And, I really feel bad for Clint because, and not just Clint, I feel bad for all the kids that are siblings to somebody that gets murdered or whatever, because they're really kind of left in the shadow of that person forever.
Or that, like you say, they're left in the shadow, but at first they're harassed, then they're left in the shadow. So they have two sides of that coin. They relentlessly harassed. You sure you didn't do it? Sure you didn't see anything? And then when they're cleared, they suddenly just don't exist anymore.
Absolutely. And like in this case, and when I say this, I'm in no way like talking bad about Holly or anything like that. But anytime we talk about a victim, we focus all on the good about them and how wonderful they are and everything. And Clint, because he's a survivor, everybody focuses on the bad that he did and what he did wrong and everything. And a lot of the times I just don't think that that's fair, because everything that I learned about Clint, he's a super stand-up guy. He was every bit as devoted to his church and his family as Holly was. And I think that just the way events ended up transpiring, he kind of got the raw end of the stick in this.
Well, and survivor's guilt's a real thing.
Absolutely
that
it is.
Can make it worse.
And I can't imagine what this kid has gone through, because a lot of the times you have survivor's guilt when there was absolutely no possible way that you could intervene. You're just guilty
her
because
parents probably have survivor's guilt.
Exactly.
They weren't there.
But I can't imagine what this kid had to have gone through, because he was there and he has to. I'm sure that to this day, he probably still beats himself up.
Yeah, if he sees a car that looks like hers, looks out the window, if they're still on that property.
And probably every time that he thinks about her, he probably thinks, why didn't I run out there? Why didn't I do more?
Could have at least screamed out the window.
Yeah. So
all those conversations that go on in our heads when we're trying to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my heart does, it really does break for Clint. But he was eventually cleared as a suspect. And that happened relatively early in the investigation. Though an exact date isn't specified, I couldn't figure out when exactly he was cleared. It happened pretty early. And this is how it happened. So Clint cooperated 100%. He provided a detailed timeline. He submitted to the polygraph, like we said. He allowed physical inspections, all of which showed absolutely no evidence of his involvement.
Generally, you hide from things like that.
Yes. His claim that he was asleep until he was woken up by the dog was consistent with the timeline, as the neighbor's scream report came around 7:50 a.m., shortly before his own 911 call. Investigators verified Drew Scott's whereabouts, that he was turkey hunting on Karen's mother's property, just as Karen had arranged, and that ruled out Clint's initial misidentification as being a deliberate lie. It makes a lot of sense. If he looks out the window, he knows that Drew is turkey hunting. Turkey hunting, you wear camouflage.
Right.
It's one of the times that you actually, aren't in orange and everything. You're in camouflage when you're hunting turkeys. So he looks out the window, he sees a dude in camouflage fighting or arguing with his sister, and he just thinks that it's Drew. And all of that really fit once they dug into it. And so it supported his explanation that he genuinely mistook the man for Drew.
The one and only time I've ever gone turkey hunting, I was in a black Chevy Trailblazer. Because
typically not how it's done.
Because they were attacking even my car. So I was like, there's 3 of them. And I named them Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. And I just kept driving. Not relevant to the story, but
interesting all the same.
Right.
There was also no forensic evidence that tied Clint to the crime. The blood in the carport was confirmed to be Holly's, with no indication that Clint had any contact with it. His clothing and body showed zero signs of a struggle, and searches of the home found nothing incriminating. And so then, I mean, the timeline we've got to talk about here, and that is, like I said, the neighbor heard the scream, and within like 30 minutes, a deputy's pulling in
At most.
at most. And so he just didn't have the time to do this. And then when you find out, where other items are discovered later, absolutely impossible, because he would have had to have driven like 30 minutes one direction, turned around and driven 30 minutes back, and he had like 20 minutes to do it in. It's just not humanly
I think
possible.
I said he would have had to have been the Flash.
Yes.
To get this done.
Exactly. So by late April 2011, the TBI was exploring other leads, including a suspect that we're going to dive into next. So the focus on Clint faded as new suspects emerged, and there was stronger circumstantial evidence to those other suspects. And then last, the Bobo family consistently defended Clint. Aaron and Dana never wavered in their support, and Whitney Duncan, the singer, publicly called out the rumors against him, and she emphasized his innocence. This unified front, combined with no charges, helped shift the public perception.
Probably still one or two that still sneered at him.
Oh, probably so.
Because,
yes,
there are those in every town.
Always.
You just kind of want to flick them in the nose.
Yep. So, for the first 3 years, the investigation is a roller coaster of dead ends. TBI gets thousands of tips, just like in every other investigation. Some of the leads are legit, but most are nonsense. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter. They've got to chase down every lead.
I will never understand why people call in and take credit themselves when they didn't do it.
I'll never understand
But
that.
there's a handful of a type of person that will do that. No, I'm not saying that happened in this case. It just came to mind with some of those not being legit.
Yeah, and you hear about that all the time, these false confessors and stuff. And I cannot understand it.
Better ways to get attention.
Absolutely.
Go do something good.
Right. So investigators chase down leads on sex offenders, and one of these stands out from all the rest. And that's a guy by the name of Terry Britt. And he was a local man with a rap sheet full of red flags. He was a registered sex offender, and at the time of Holly's abduction, he was living in Parsons, Tennessee. His home, though, was roughly less than a mile from the Bobo home. His criminal charges make it obvious why TBI was taking a really close look at this asshat. His charges at this point were 1, sexual offense convictions. Britt was convicted of multiple sex-related crimes before Holly's abduction. Reports describe him as having a history full of sexual assaults. Though specific charges aren't always detailed, one source mentions a 2002 conviction for attempted aggravated sexual battery, which led him to have to be registered as a sex offender. And then he had charges for stalking and harassment. He had convictions for stalking and harassment, which obviously raised red flags during the investigation. And these charges stemmed from incidents involving just random women in the Parsons area, which contributed to his reputation as a local concern, and I would say as a local dirtbag. And a lot of the time you hear about like stalkers and stuff like that and their ex-husbands or ex-boyfriends, and they won't leave their girlfriend's ex-wife, whatever, alone. This freaking guy, he just went out and randomly found women, it sounds like, to then just randomly stalk.
Jeez.
And then he was linked to property crimes, including burglary and theft. Exact dates and details are sparse, These offenses were part of his broader criminal record, which spanned years before Holly's disappearance. And then finally, Britt faced charges for failing to comply with the sex offender registry requirements, such as not updating his address or his status, and that also added to his legal troubles. So at the time of Holly's abduction, Britt was in his late 40s, and as I mentioned, he lived less than a mile from the Bobos. He also fit Clint's description almost perfectly. He was the right height, the right weight, and he had dark hair. His criminal history shows that he has a preference for blonde women with blue eyes, and that matches Holly's description perfectly. So, lead TBI agent Terry Dickus zeroed in on Britt. He was able to get a warrant to wiretap Britt's house and to search his property. So, TBI searched Britt's home and vehicles extensively, and they found a blonde hair in his van that resembled Holly's. Later testing, however, would find that it was not a DNA match. But it does beg the question as to whose hair was it?
Yeah, whose family is also out there searching for someone.
Exactly. And they used cadaver dogs, and those dogs hit on tools and on his van, which makes me wonder who was dead there. Because cadaver dogs typically hit for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not just random.
Because they have a difference between live hunt dogs and cadaver
dogs. Absolutely. I earlier mentioned some of Holly's belongings that were found in the woods, and as Britt lived nearby, those items were found near where he lived. Britt's alibi is that he was buying a bathtub with his wife that morning. But when investigators follow up, the salvage yard where they were supposedly buying it had no record of it. Some reports say that a handwritten receipt turned up later, but that's shaky at best. So Agent Dickus is convinced that Britt's their guy, and I can understand why. His other crimes definitely match the same MO. Holly is a perfect match for his preferred victims. He's living within a mile of the Bobo house, and his alibi is questionable at best. Unfortunately, though, Agent Dickus's supervisors begin to feel that he was getting tunnel vision and he was too focused on Britt and was ignoring other possibilities. So they pulled him off the case, and Britt was never charged in Holly's disappearance. And following that move by the TBI, the investigation stalled. Meanwhile, the Bobo family gets even more desperate. Karen collapses on TV, begging for Holly's return. Clint's racked with guilt, asking himself why he didn't act faster. The case goes quiet, but the pressure continues to build. For the next 2 to 3 years, the investigation remains stalled. It stays open, though, and investigators continue to work it, determined to find Holly and discover what happened to her that April morning. So John Dylan Adams, also goes by the name of Dylan, was arrested on federal gun charges on September 25th, 2013, by the Madison County Sheriff's Department in Madison County, Tennessee. And this arrest followed a federal arrest warrant, which was issued on September 16th, 2013. He was subsequently turned over to the U.S. Marshal Service. So Dylan's arrest occurred in Madison County, like I said, and not directly in Decatur County, where the Bobo case was centered. Family members claim that Dylan was already cooperating with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation on the Holly Bobo case by early 2013 and was housed in Memphis at the same time, though TBI officials did not confirm that he was in any sort of a witness protection program or a safe house, as some relatives would later suggest. So John Dylan Adams was born around 1988 because he was 26 in 2014, and he went by his middle name, Dylan. And he was about 4 years younger than his older brother, Zachary, but they grew up in the same holiday home under their mother, Sydney's care. He had significant developmental challenges. Cindy described him as having a low IQ, and his cousin Moss Miller likened him to a 10-year-old despite him being an adult. He attended special schools for children with learning disabilities, indicating that he required extra support from a young age. Dylan was described as gentle and compliant, someone who would do anything anyone told him to do. And his cousin Miller is the one that said that. This vulnerability made him susceptible to influence, particularly from his older brother Zachary and their social circle. Dylan's school was tailored to his disabilities, likely through special education programs in Decatur County. He didn't progress to higher education, and he struggled with basic tasks like telling time. He had to wear a digital watch just so he could tell what time it was. And unlike Zachary, Dylan had a minimal criminal record before 2011. His first notable legal issue came with his 2014 arrest on unrelated federal weapons charges, which led to his initial questioning in the Bobo case. There's no evidence of prior arrests or any violent behavior. Dylan lived with or near Zachary at 235 Adams Lane, sharing a chaotic environment influenced by drugs. He was less dominant than Zachary, often following his brother's lead. And Cindy noted Dylan's dependence, saying he couldn't have acted independently in any serious matters due to his mental capacity. Dylan was less prominent in the community than Zachary, likely due to his disabilities and his quiet demeanor. He wasn't flagged as a troublemaker like his brother was, but was associated with the same drug-involved group, including Autry and Austin. Dylan was seen as a peripheral figure, overshadowed by Zachary's notoriety. Karen Bobo taught Dylan in grade school and didn't recall him as being problematic. And that suggests that he blended into the background as a child. His disabilities made him less visible in the community's narrative of troublemakers.
Right.
The family, particularly Cindy and Moss Miller, emphasized Dylan's mental challenges, portraying him as incapable of orchestrating or even understanding complex actions. They believed he was unfairly targeted by the Bobo case due to his association with Zachary and his inability to navigate interrogations effectively. Now, the federal indictment, which led to his 2013 arrest, charged Dylan with being an unlawful user of controlled substances or an addict in possession of a firearm. Specifically, the indictment alleged that Dylan, as someone addicted to or unlawfully using controlled substances, illegally possessed a firearm, which violates federal law under 18 USC 922 G3. The exact nature of the firearm or the incident leading to the charge isn't detailed in public records, but it was serious enough to warrant federal prosecution. And I did find it really unusual. I'd never even heard of this charge before. And so I don't know if, like, behind the scenes, TBI had a suspicion and they wanted to get Dylan in custody and they worked this out, or I don't know how it came to be, but I had never heard of that before. Anyway, while the gun charges were obviously unrelated to Holly Bobo's abduction, Dylan's detention on these charges led to his questioning by TBI agents about her case. And during this period, he reportedly made statements implicating himself, his brother Zachary Adams, Jason Autry, and Shane Austin in Holly's abduction, murder, and related crimes. These statements, which he later claimed were coerced due to his low IQ and prolonged interrogation, form the basis for his later charges. Now, there's no clear public record indicating the final disposition of the federal gun charges. I don't know if they were dropped, if he pleaded out, if they were prosecuted separately. I have no idea. The focus in reports quickly shifted to Dylan's Bobo related charges, suggesting the gun case was overshadowed by the murder investigation. His cooperation with TBI, whether voluntary or pressured, likely influenced how the gun charges were handled, but no specific resolution is documented. So, following the TBI interviews of Dylan, another arrest is made. On March 5th, 2014, they arrest Dylan's brother, Zach, who was 29 at the time and was known to be a meth user and dealer. He lived in Holiday, which is about 10 miles from Darden. Zachary Ray Adams was born around 1984, and he was, like I said, 29 in 2014. He grew up in Decatur County and attended local schools in that county. His mother, Cindy, noted that he didn't have learning disabilities, unlike his brother Dylan, and this suggests that he likely followed a standard educational path, at least until his teenage years. His childhood wasn't described in detail, but by adolescence, he showed signs of rebellion. His cousin, Moss Miller, described him as having a good heart before drugs changed him, suggesting that he wasn't always troubled. Karen Bobo also taught Zachary in elementary school and recalled no significant issues then, indicating that he was an average student at least early on. By his mid-teens, Zachary began using drugs, particularly methamphetamines, which became a defining issue, as it always does. Miller noted that Zachary's drug addiction made him unpredictable and violent by his late teens, altering his personality and straining family ties. On February 7th, 2004, when Zachary was 19, he recklessly shot his mother, Cindy, in the knee with a Glock 9mm pistol at their home. And this led to an order of protection to be filed by Cindy and Joseph King, and they described Zachary as a danger to them and to the community.
Think?
Yeah. And the incident marked significant escalation in his troubled behavior.
Shot his mother.
Yeah, shot his mother.
Wonderful.
Now, before 2011, Zachary had arrests for drug-related charges and minor offenses like domestic assault, like shooting his mother. And
not funny, but
insane. And he claimed in a 2024 interview that his record lacked any serious violence other than shooting his mother, which he said was an accident. But his reputation in the community was that of a drug user and a drug dealer.
If you look past shooting my mom,
I'm really a good guy.
I'm a stand-up dude.
I only killed that one person.
Just the one.
Just the one.
Oh my.
Zachary had a tumultuous personal life. He dated a girl by the name of Rebecca Earp, who later testified against him and claimed that he made threatening comments about Holly's case. His drug use reportedly fueled conflicts with family and partners.
As it usually does.
As it almost always does. By his late 20s, Zachary was deeply entrenched in the local drug scene, associating with individuals like Jason Autry and Shane Austin, who we'll be talking about here shortly. He drove a white Nissan pickup as well, which was impounded after an unrelated arrest in early 2011.
So we're highlighting that drugs are not the answer, people.
Yes, drugs are not the answer. And I will just note quickly here that he drove a white Nissan pickup, and a neighbor that morning saw a white pickup racing away from the scene.
No? Another one of those dun 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 moments.
Yes. Now, As we've said, Zachary was known in Decatur County as a troublemaker, and former TBI investigator Terry Dickus, who initially ruled him out as a suspect, noted that Zachary and his associates were brought up early in the Bobo case because they were seen as bad people who were into drugs. This reputation stemmed from his visible drug use and run ins with the law. Cindy Adams maintained that her sons were drug addicts, not murderers, suggesting Zachary's issues were substance driven rather than inherently violent. However, cousin Moss Miller acknowledged that Zachary's addiction led to violent outbursts, creating fear even within their own family.
They call it gateway for a reason.
Yeah, well, meth is what you get to after you go through the gate.
Well, I know, but
that's about as bad as it gets.
It leads to violent things.
Absolutely, it does. I will say that in my experience, more times than not, it leads to violence to get more drugs.
Mm-hmm.
They end up killing somebody to rob them for money to get more drugs, as opposed to rape and murder somebody randomly and not end up getting drugs out of the deal.
But so who is, I know it's a cousin, but Moss Miller, why is this person popping up so important? The only other person in the family that would speak?
I think so. Yeah. Okay. It's like it's just they go and they try to get a family member to talk, and he was apparently a cousin that was willing to.
Okay.
So, but Zach has a rap sheet which includes assault, drugs, and like we said, he even shot his mom in the knee.
Just the once.
Just once. But no sex crimes. So neither brother was initially linked to Holly Bobo before her abduction. They weren't known to have any direct connection to the Bobo family beyond Karen having taught them in elementary school years before. Right. Their implication arose post-abduction due to their reputations and proximity of living about 10 to 15 miles from Darden, which, the way you describe the area, to be fair, that kind of implicates everybody.
Right.
Because it's a tiny little
Only
spot.
Only 399 of them.
Yeah. But neither Zachary nor Dylan was suspected in Holly's disappearance immediately after April 13th. In early investigations focused on others like Clint and then on Terry Britt, the sex offender who lived close to the Bobo home. The Adams brothers grew up in a home marked by dysfunction, exacerbated by Zachary's drug addiction and the resulting family conflicts. The 2004 protection order against Zachary when Dylan was only about 15 indicates a turbulent household where Cindy and Joseph feared for their safety and that of their other children. Both brothers were linked to Jason Autry and Shane Austin, who again, we will be discussing very soon. And this group of young men were known for drug use and petty crime, operating in the rural fringes of Decatur County. Their home on Adams Lane was a hub for this activity, and it was later searched extensively by the TBI. Holiday, like Darden, was a small working-class community where poverty and limited opportunities contributed to the drug issues. The brothers' lives reflected this, with Zachary diving into the drug trade and Dylan staying closer to home, less independent. So, as we said, investigators arrested Zach in March 2014 following Dylan's statement to investigators. The TBI leaned hard on Dylan, interrogating him for hours about Holly, with not a focus on the federal gun stuff at all. They offered him a deal, no jail time if he moves in. And I just got to say, this is one of the most insane things I think I've ever heard of. And as much as I don't like dirtbags, I love our Constitution. And in my mind, this treads all over it. I cannot believe they got away with this. And I'm just scandalized by the whole thing. But I digress. So they offered Dylan a deal that he'll get no jail time if he agrees to move in with Dennis Benjamin, who is a retired cop and a Bobo family friend who has been poking around the case. And then 5 weeks later, Benjamin calls 911 to let him know that Dylan was ready to confess. So, yeah. Now, before we get into his confession, I think that now is the best time to discuss the next two asshats, which are going to be popping up in the investigation. And that is Jason Autry and Shane Austin. So, Jason Wayne Autry was born around 1975 in Tennessee, as he was reported to be 49 years old in 2024. The exact birth date and place are not publicly documented, but he grew up in Decatur County, likely in or near Holiday or Parsons, where he spent most of his life. Little is known about Autry's parents or siblings. I had a hard time finding out who was related to who in this entire mess. But Autry was a cousin to Shane Austin, which suggests that there was likely a family network in rural West Tennessee in that area. His upbringing was in a working class community, typical of Decatur County, where economic opportunities were very limited and drug issues were prevalent. There's no specific anecdotes about Autry's childhood, but he was part of the same school system as Zachary and Dylan Adams, and Karen Bobo also taught him in grade school. She noted no major issues with him as a child, suggesting that he was unremarkable academically or behaviorally at that early stage. Autry likely attended local schools such as Decatur County Middle or Riverside High, though no records confirm this. Given Karen Bobo's comment, he was in elementary school in the 1980s, aligning with a standard educational path until at least middle school. There's no indication that he pursued any kind of higher education. As a teenager, Autry began associating with a rough crowd, including the Adams brothers and Austin. No specific incidents from this period are documented, but his later drug involvement suggests that he may have started experimenting with substances in his teens, which is common in the area's methamphetamine scene. Autry had a significant criminal record by his 20s and 30s. He was incarcerated 3 times for theft and drug-related offenses before the Bobo case, admitting to a methamphetamine and morphine addiction during Zachary Adams' 2017 trial. By 2011, Autry had multiple felony convictions, including a 2012 charge for being a felon in possession of a firearm, indicating a pattern of lawbreaking tied to drugs and property crimes. Details of individual arrests are sparse, but his nickname, Train, and reputation as a drug user suggests that he was a known figure in Decatur County's underworld. Autry lived a transient, drug-centered life, moving between Holiday and nearby areas. He had no documented steady job, likely supporting himself through drug deals or petty crimes. He was close to Zachary Adams, whom he'd known for years, and he frequented Shane Austin's trailer, which was another hub for the group. Autry had a girlfriend, Angela Smith, before 2011, and she later corroborated parts of his daily routine during the 2017 trial. Their relationship was volatile and tied to the whole drug lifestyle.
Makes sense.
Yeah. He also had connections with other locals like Victor Dinsmore, who testified about Autry's activities. His social circle was tightly knit, revolving around drugs and shared criminality. Former TBI investigator Terry Dickus noted that Autry, like the Adams brothers, was flagged early in the Bobo case as bad people into drugs, reflecting his notoriety in the community even before Holly's abduction. Now, as we've discussed, Autry first came under scrutiny in late 2013 following Dylan Adams' arrest on federal gun charges on September 25th, 2013. Dylan's statements to the TBI implicated Autry, Zachary Adams, and Shane Austin in Holly's abduction and murder, claiming that he saw Holly alive at Zachary's home with Autry present on April 13th, 2011. So our final outstanding citizen is Shane Austin. Shane's birth date isn't publicly recorded, but he was a young adult in 2011, likely born between 1983 and 1986, making him somewhere between 25 to 28 during Holly's abduction. He was from Decatur County, probably Holiday or Parsons, where he lived most of his life. As we said, he was Jason Autry's cousin, part of a local family network. No information about his parents, siblings, or early home life was available. Like Autry, he grew up in a rural, working class community marked by economic hardship. As is the case with every one of these losers, Karen Bobo also taught Austin in elementary school and recalled him as unproblematic, suggesting he was quiet or an average child. No specific childhood incidents or traits are noted, but he was raised in the same small town environment as his cousin and the Adams brothers. Austin likely attended local schools such as Decatur County Middle or Riverside High, though no records confirm this. He was in elementary school in the late 1980s or early 1990s, reaching high school by the late 90s or maybe early 2000s. There's no indication of further education. By 2011, Austin had short red hair and was described as around 5'10 to 6 foot tall, 180 to 200 pounds, partially matching Clint Bobo's abductor description, minus the dark hair covering the neck. This physical profile was noted during the investigation. No teenage activities are documented, but Austin's later drug involvement suggests that he may too have started associating with the wrong crowd in his teens, a pattern that we saw with Autry and Zachary Adams. Austin's criminal record before 2011 is less extensive than Autry's or Zach Adams. No specific arrests are detailed in public sources, but his ties to the drug scene imply possible minor charges, such as possession or trespassing, though that's not confirmed. He lived in a trailer on Yellow Springs Road in Holiday, and that was a key location in the investigation. He was likely unemployed, surviving through drug deals or maybe casual work, and his trailer was a hangout for Autry, Zachary, and Dylan Adams. The trailer will become very important later. So his cousinship with Autry was his closest documented tie. They shared a bond through family and drugs. Austin was tight with Zachary and Dylan Adams, part of their drug group. Rebecca Earp recalled cooking for him and Zachary, showing that he was a regular in their orbit. No romantic relationships are noted for him. Austin was less notorious than Autry or Zachary, but still seen as part of the drug crowd. TBI agent Terry Dickus noted that Austin's name came up early tips due to his lifestyle, though he was overshadowed by bigger players until 2013. So Dylan's account was given during interrogations, and that led to all the following arrests. So Zachary Adams was then arrested on March 5th, 2014, and charged with especially aggravated kidnapping and first-degree murder. Dylan Adams was arrested in relation to Holly's case on September 17th, 2014, and was initially charged with tampering with evidence. He faced additional charges of rape on October the 14th, 2014, and was indicted for premeditated first-degree murder, murder in perpetration, aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated rape on May 21st, 2015. And I got to note that big of a fit as I threw about them making a deal with him, he wouldn't go to jail if he lived with this cop and friend of the Bobos. And then I wasn't able to find what happened with that deal and what the hell But
what was he ready to talk about?
well, he did talk. He admitted to all this, but then he's charged with rape and murder and all of this. So I don't know if they just conveniently forgot the deal, or I don't know what happened. That whole thing seems super sketchy.
So it doesn't count anymore.
Yeah, the whole thing just strikes me as very sketchy, and I don't like it. It stinks. And then Jason Autry was arrested on April 29th, 2014, and charged with especially aggravated kidnapping, first-degree murder, and rape. Shane Austin was the outlier of the group. He actually was never arrested in connection with the Holly Bobo case. He had signed an immunity deal in March of 2014, which was revoked shortly thereafter for his lack of cooperation. But he died by an apparent suicide on February 23rd, 2015, before any charges were filed.
Howard.
Yes. Autry's long association with Zachary, his criminal history, and his presence in Dylan's narrative made him a logical suspect. Tips from the community, which had named Autry early on due to his drug reputation, also contributed. His proximity to Austin's trailer, where some of Holly's items were later found nearby, further raised suspicion. Dylan tells investigators that he went to Zach's house on April 13th, 2011 to borrow a truck, and he claims that he saw Holly there, live in a pink t-shirt with Zach and Zach's friend Jason Autry. Zach allegedly bragged about raping Holly and filming it, although no video ever surfaced. And Dylan's story's completely full of holes. He gives dates that don't match, and the details continue to shift. His mom would later say that it was all coerced, that the TBI fed him lines, but it's enough to charge Zach with kidnapping, rape, and murder, and Dylan gets lesser charges, and the case explodes again. In September 2014, another break in the case came. Ginseng hunters stumbled upon human remains in the woods near I-40. It was later confirmed to be Holly's skull. Be Holly's skull with a bullet in the back. It's 30 miles from Darden, the area that her phone pinged. The TBI calls it the most expensive investigation they've ever done, which cost millions of dollars, thousands of man-hours. They've got no DNA linking Zach or the others to Holly, but witnesses start talking.
Good. Start talking.
Zach's ex-girlfriend, Rebecca Earp, says that he threatened her after Holly vanished, saying, "I'll tie you up like I did Holly Bobo, and no one will see you again." Another friend claims Zach bragged about disposing of her body. A guy named Victor Dinsmore trades a .32 caliber gun, which was allegedly the murder weapon, for drugs from Autry and Austin. And it's found in a creek in 2017, but forensics can't tie it to the crime, and there's no DNA, and there's no ballistics match.
Convenient.
Yeah, and then on February 23rd, 2015, Shane Austin, like I said, hangs himself before TBI is able to charge him. Two other guys, Jeffrey and Mark Percy, also get arrested for tampering with evidence in connection to, it was something about a video of Zach assaulting a woman who looked like Holly, but that case falls apart too. The case is a mess, but TBI's building it on testimony, but no hard evidence. So in September 2017, Zach Adams goes to trial in Savannah, Tennessee, and he's faced with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and rape. The prosecution's led by Jennifer Nichols, and they've got no physical evidence, like I said, which ties Zach to Holly. There's no DNA, there's no fingerprints, there's nothing. It's all witnesses, and their star is Jason Autry. So Autry takes a plea deal, agreeing to 8 years instead of life, and he lays out a horrifying story. He says Zach showed up at his place on April 13th with Holly in his truck, wrapped in a blanket. They'd been up all night doing meth. Zach asked for help dumping her body in the Tennessee River. So they drove to a bridge planning to, and there's a warning for listener discretion here because this part's a little bit brutal. They drove to a bridge planning to gut her and sink her, but she moved and they realized that she was still alive. So Autry claims that he played lookout while Zach shot her in the head. The shot caused the birds to scatter, then nothing but silence. Rebecca Earp repeats her threat story. Dylan's confession gets airtime, though he's not there, as it's claimed that he was too fragile to testify. I don't understand how that works because you have a constitutional right to face your accusers, and without the defense having the opportunity to cross-examine Dylan, I don't know how they can bring his confession in. I don't understand how that decision was made. But
he's too fragile.
Yeah.
Too fragile now.
Now, if all this is true.
Yeah.
They show the jury Holly's promise ring, her notebook, her lunch bag, trying to tug on the jury's heartstrings. They argue that only Zach and Autry knew that she'd been shot before her body was found. Defense, led by Jennifer Thompson, tears into the prosecution's case. They claim that Autry's a liar. They say that he made it up to get the deal using case details from discovery. They say that the cell phone pings didn't match the timeline. And they point that Zach's too tall, 6'2", much too skinny at the time to fit Clint's description. The TBI investigator, Terry Dickus, testifies for the defense, saying that he ruled out Zach early and confirmed his alibis, and they all checked out. There was no evidence. The defense points at Terry Britt, showing that he shares the same MO. They point to his shaky alibi and his description, which matches Clint's to a T. So after 9 days, the jury deliberates for hours, and on September 22nd, 2017, they announce that they have reached a verdict. Stands with his lawyer as the verdict is read, revealing his future or lack thereof. The jury's findings are that Zach is guilty on all counts, and the judge sentences him to life plus 50 years. The courtroom erupts in cries and cheers, and Karen Bobo sobs, and the community exhales. Justice has finally been served, right? Well, maybe or maybe not. So Zach's conviction doesn't end the questions. Dylan pleads guilty to lesser charges in 2018, and he gets a 15-year sentence. Autry's out by 2023 thanks to his plea deal, but cracks form fast. In 2024, Autry recants to his neuropsychologist, Dr. Katie Spirko. He says that he fabricated everything in jail, weaving Holly into his day using the TBI files. His lawyer told him that he'd lose if he didn't come up with a story and claimed that there was a 95% chance of conviction. The trial judge had called him credible, but now he's admitting that it's all lies. Zach's lawyer files for post-conviction relief, arguing that Autry's recanting of his story clears him. Critics slam the TBI for coercion, lost evidence, political pressure to close the case, and Terry Britt's still free, and some say he's the real killer. Britt's description, Britt's history, the cadaver dogs hitting on his van, and the blonde hair found during the search wasn't Holly's, but whose was it? The rest of the evidence doesn't rule him out, and it's a nagging question. The Bobo family's torn, believes Zach's guilty, but with the confession being recanted, it shakes everything up. True crime forums explode, Reddit threads, podcasts like this one. Questions are everywhere. Was it a drug-fueled crime of opportunity, a lone predator like Britt, or did the TBI railroad the wrong guys? As we love to do, let's unpack the theories. So first, the prosecution's story that Zach, Dylan, Autry, and likely Austin snatched Holly, raped her, killed her, all high on meth. It's brutal, it's chaotic, but it also fits their lifestyle. The lack of evidence gnaws at it, though. Second, the Terry Britt theory. I do believe that Terry is a calculated predator. Did he stalk Holly and strike her when she was alone? Aligns with his past and seems to match Clint's account better than theory number one. So why wasn't he charged? Third is a hybrid theory that involved all of the above. Maybe Britt took her and the drug crew got involved later. Is this possible? Probable? All I can say is that I didn't find any links between Britt and the meth heads in my research. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. And as small as the area is, it's likely that they all knew each other, at least in passing. And then the fourth option is that TBI got it wrong entirely. And this theory is that it was someone that we don't even know about, and the meth heads and Britt are all innocent. So, yeah. As opinionated as I am, I'm not sure what to think. I don't put much stock in theories 3 or 4. Terry Britt is a sexual predator. I think that we can say that unequivocally.
Right.
His convictions prove it to me. And I find it extremely unlikely that he would share Holly with anybody else.
They rarely do.
Rarely do. And there's tremendous age differences between this group of young 20-year-olds, and he's in his 40s, and it just doesn't make any sense. I just don't buy that theory at all. So it doesn't track for me. And I also find it hard to believe that it was somebody else. There just aren't a lot of people in that area to begin with. And so suspects are limited.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that it's even possible that it was some stranger due to the remote location of the Bobo residence and that short time window.
Because the timing was perfect.
It had to be somebody that knew exactly when her parents were leaving and approximately when she would be coming out to the car.
Not a random transient.
There's no way. I just don't think there's any way. And so that leaves theories 1 and 2.
Incredibly coincidental.
Yeah, to the point of unbelievable.
Yeah, disturbingly coincidental.
So that leaves theories 1 and 2, and I can make arguments for both. I haven't seen any interview tapes, so I was unable to form an opinion on if I believe that Dylan was coerced or not, but I am always hesitant anytime someone with a low IQ is depended on for a large portion of the evidence that's used in a conviction. I've seen it so many times where DNA 20 to 30 years down the road proves them to have falsely confessed.
Right.
And I think that the West Memphis 3 case and Jesse Misskelley Jr. is a perfect example of that. I firmly believe that the West Memphis 3 are innocent, and I think that those cops got Jesse in that interrogation room and bullied him into confessing and fed him the details that they wanted him to say. Right. I'm totally convinced of that. And so without being able to see the interview, I can't make any judgments on the reliability of Dylan's confession in Holly's case. But I do find Terry Britt and the evidence that was found at his home extremely concerning, to say the least. And as I've said, his past makes me look very closely at him.
Yeah.
He lived near the Bobo home and could have easily watched Holly and the family long enough to nail down their normal timelines. He was less than a mile away. And just as Holly's dad, Dana, had theorized early on, the likelihood that a violent sex offender who has already committed rapes has turned over a new leaf is damn near zero. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
I'm better now, guys. Come on.
Yeah. Him kidnapping and killing Holly would follow perfectly with the progression that we see in thousands of offenders. They learn the first time to never leave a victim alive to testify against them again. And I can't be sure either way, but I do believe that Britt fits the known profile of this type of criminal better than the 4 meth heads. For sure.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not an FBI profiler or anything like that, but I have looked at a lot of cases. And I would say that this particular kidnapping was pretty highly organized. They, in my opinion, somebody watched that house for an extended period of time to nail down their routine. Mm-hmm. And they planned this out, and they were sitting there waiting that morning, all planned out, and they were able to get in there, get her to a vehicle, and get the hell out of Dodge without being seen.
In 30 minutes at most.
I would even say considerably less than that, because the neighbor's mom got there.
Are they Domino's drivers? 30 minutes or less?
Or was it somebody that lived close enough that he took her to his house first and then waited for an opportunity to get rid of her?
But my experience, and I don't want to stereotype, my experience with the meth heads I know are not calm enough to be orchestrated enough to plan their day.
Most meth heads?
Much less.
Yeah, that's what...
Much less a murder that took place this quickly.
Even with meth heads that do murder because they like break into somebody's house to steal from them or whatever, it's always
messy as hell.
It's messy and it's completely random.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, I need some meth and I'm going to go break into this house. And they do. And somebody's home and they end up killing them and running away. Exactly to your point. They don't sit down strung out on meth. They already said that they were up all night the night before. So we know that they're tweaking hard by morning. And we're expected to believe that they executed this. I mean, you got to say it's a pretty brilliant abduction, and we're able to get very quick, and we're able to get out of the area.
No.
Because they live 10 miles away. This isn't Terry Britt.
They're not quiet enough.
They're not quiet enough. I don't think they're smart enough. And if they're tweaking that hard, they're not lucid enough.
Yeah, they're not lucid enough for it.
So I have some pretty serious doubts about the meth heads. Don't put me on that
jury. I already think they're guilty. They're not guilty.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I really got to question Dylan's confessions with everything that we've learned about him.
Yeah.
And without that, they don't have much. And they give the other freaking guy a deal for 8 years. Like, if you're facing murder and rape charges and your lawyer tells you that they've got you, you're going to prison for life, or you can tell this story and you get out in 8 years. That's a hell of a deal. 8 years. So I don't know.
Scaling that decision is not difficult.
No, not at all. And then you have TBI investigator Dickus, and he felt certain that it was Britt. So much so that he was willing to testify for the defense in Zach's trial, which is huge.
That shocked me.
Because you've got the thin blue line, and not very often do cops cross that line and go against the agency that employs them. And so it really tells me a lot about Dickus as a person and his integrity, that he would be willing to do that.
Do they still employ him?
I have no idea what happened to him after that. But I gotta believe that he probably faced some repercussions for choosing to do that. And so, again, it really does speak to his integrity that he was
Yeah.
willing to do it because apparently that's what he thought was the right thing to do, regardless of how it affected him. But that does carry a lot of weight with me
Mm.
because I know it could not have been an easy decision for him.
Right. Not at all.
So if I was on a jury and I was forced to vote one way or the other, I would have to lean towards Terry Britt. How do you feel?
Well, at the risk of being a lemming, I'm going to follow your lead because I agree with it too. So,
I mean, it's hard not to.
mm-hmm. Well, we discussed, in depth why.
And the part that we didn't include, but I think it's probably really important to mention, is these meth heads that are tweaking like crazy left no physical evidence behind.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It
None.
would have been messy.
Yeah.
It would have been messy.
No blood in the truck. No blood at the trailer. No blood anywhere. I have a hard time swallowing that.
Yeah.
But you do have cadaver dogs hitting at Terry Britt's house.
Well, and wouldn't they be attempting, and I don't know what she had on her person, but wouldn't they be attempting to sell something that she would have had on her person?
Almost
That
certainly.
would come back to them, and that isn't part of this case, so
Almost certainly.
come on.
I mean, they found her some of her items, her cell phone, and stuff that they could have pawned or sold on the street or something
Right?
like that, And to your point, they were found ditched out in the woods somewhere, not sold.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that this group did it. And if they didn't, if they did, then they deserve to rot in hell for what they did.
Exactly.
If they didn't do it, then you've got two innocent guys in prison. One did 8 years. And the most tragic is if they didn't do it, somebody killed themselves because of this.
Yeah.
So,
But that's a fine line too, because to me, and I called him a coward because if he did it because he was facing stuff that he didn't want, he knew if he knew he was wrong and he was facing consequences and he knew what they could be, and that's why he did it.
right.
But then there's the other side of the coin. Did he do it because he knew he was in there because he was innocent?
Right. And did his lawyer tell him something
You'll
similar?
never know.
There's a 95% chance that you're going to jail for the rest of your life. And he was like, I can't go to prison for the rest of my life for something I didn't do. And he ended up taking his own life. I don't know.
No one.
And
no one will.
That's the tragedy of this whole thing. And honestly, I can say that, and I did say at the beginning that I thought law enforcement handled the case correctly and did a stellar job.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not convinced that TBI supervisors made the right decision when they removed Discus from the case.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a very good chance that he was on the right trail with Terry Britt. And I will also go on to say that with Terry Britt's rap sheet, with what he has already been convicted of doing, experience tells us that it's very likely that he has killed or will kill.
Yeah.
Because that is a pretty damn natural progression for somebody that's, we're not talking about a teenage kid that got drunk or whatever in like a case of date rape or something like that. We're talking about somebody that went out
methodical
and violently attacked. And I'm not saying that date rape is okay or anything like that, but
right.
we're talking about somebody that went out, stalked women, grabbed them, and violently raped strangers.
Had a type
that he was attracted to, which matches Holly's perfectly. And we know that natural progression for those guys is to eventually either accidentally or purposely kill a victim and then continue to do so. Is he that? I don't have any idea, but there's plenty of reason to question that guy.
Yeah.
So, Holly's legacy is bittersweet. Her case changed Arden as people lock their doors now.
But
Absolutely. The TBI spent millions, but did they get it right? As of April 2025, Zach's still fighting his conviction. Autry's free, Britt's uncharged, and Holly's a memory. Bones buried in a grave. Song of remembrance sung by her cousin. So before we close, I want to invite all of the listeners to find and follow us on social media. And if you like what we're doing and how we do it, please like this episode and give us a follow. Feel free to reach out to us at info@darkdialogue.com with critiques or kudos or case suggestions.
share us with your friends.
Absolutely share us, and feel free to reach out to us on social media, on our Facebook page as well. We love and appreciate each and every one of you more than you can possibly imagine. So, as we close this chapter of Dark Dialogue, we're left with the weight of stories that linger, lives altered, truths uncovered, and questions that may never find answers.
These cases remind us of the fragility of safety, the resilience of those who seek justice, and the humanity that binds us, even in the darkest moments. Holly's story, like so many others, isn't just about loss. It's about the courage of a family, the persistence of a community, and the hope that drives us to keep searching for life.
We carry these narratives not to dwell in sorrow, but to honor the truth and reflect on what they teach us. They teach us about compassion, accountability, and the strength to face the unknown.
So we'd like to thank you for joining us, for listening with open hearts, and for holding space for these difficult truths. So until next time, this is Dark Dialogue, where we confront the shadows to find meaning in the silence.
Stay safe, stay curious, and keep the dialogue alive.